We're about to talk with two of our dear friends, Richard Freeman and Mary Taylor, about the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hello.
Hey, Waylon.
Hey, Waylon. Good to see you.
So you two have a new book, and the title is When Love Comes to Light. There it is for Facebook, and here it is for Instagram. And you're also doing a course about it that we are inviting everyone. Elephant is a big fan of Shambhala Publications, which is the publisher. We go way back with them. And you're doing a course with Shambhala. This is not an ad. We're not even involved, but we're just big fans of you two and Shambhala. So what in the world, your subtitle here, Bringing Wisdom from the Bhagavad Gita into Modern Life, is sort of my question. Like, what the heck do you do with modern life?
Well, art,
Yeah.
and that it's all metaphor for your immediate circumstances, which are not always easy, particularly these days. So we often find ourselves in, once we start to wake up, that there are a lot of deeper problems with relationships, with ego, with
And even before we wake up, or even
We're
start
totally
to,
out of
we're
it.
totally out of
Totally
it.
out of
We have
it.
bad problems.
And you don't mean literally waking up, when we start to awaken on the spiritual path or on
Yeah.
the just growing up generally. We get in fights with our loved ones, or we hate on people on Twitter who think differently politically,
Or we have some challenge that, family, or, some really difficult situation in the world that arises. And so then we're faced with crisis. And that's the story of the Gita. And the Gita is this little section of the big book called the Mahabharata,
and that's like the epic.
the epic.
it's a huge epic. It's probably the longest poem in the world.
Wow.
It's enormous, and it's all in verse. And it's a brilliant text. And right in the later, just past the middle, we come to this, which is one of the highlights.
Coming to this, meaning the Bhagavad
Bhagavad
Gita
Gita.
section.
Yeah.
And so it's stories within stories of, different related people, good guys and bad
The whole
guys.
Mahabharata is.
Yeah, the whole Mahabharata is. And and the Bhagavad Gita, which means, Bhagavan means the holder of Bhaga, which means opulence. And it's often translated as
Opulence,
God.
like wealth or abundance or something.
Yeah, or power, or the internal energy,
Fire.
or Kundalini or something. It's Bhagavan. And but it's usually translated as God. And so most interpretations are theistic
Of the Gita.
of the Gita. So it means the song of God, or the song of Bhagavan. And it takes place on a battlefield. So it's very famous. It wasn't spoken in a rose garden, or a lot of these big teachings are given, near ponds with lotus flowers and beautiful.
They're
setting.
peaceful.
They're peaceful.
Lovely.
Or it's in a monastery, and this is in the worst of situations, because it's just at the beginning of a big battle between two extended armies, and the hero of the text is Arjuna, and Arjuna actually means precious one. You sort of say to somebody, "Hey, sweetie, hey Arjuna, how you doing?" And Arjuna's charioteer, who happens to be Krishna, who happens to be the Paramatman, or the being who lives in the heart of all beings, and who is the universe.
So Krishna is sort of
Krishna
the god
is-
of gods,
Yeah, he's
the universe.
Yeah.
Okay. So the universe is driving.
and he represents the highest intelligence. And so he happens to be the charioteer. And the chariot, of course, is a metaphor for your body and your senses,
Your life.
your life, and different stages of your mind. And the highest part of mind is this discriminating awareness. And that is this function which isn't actually you in the sense of what you identify with as you. And so what happens is at the beginning of this huge battle.
And Arjuna Arjuna has been trained his whole life as a warrior, and yet he's a prince. So Arjuna is a princely warrior, and he's been training his whole life for battle. And so he and Krishna are best friends, like they're like you and Ivan. And they are.
Ivan is the one of the, I guess,
Shambhala.
co-publisher
Yeah.
at Shambhala.
And they've known each other through thick and thin.
So they're going to war together.
They're going to war together, and they come into the battlefield, and they're all pumped up because he's like going into battle.
And Krishna is just the charioteer. He said he wouldn't participate.
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't be.
He didn't. Yeah.
It wouldn't be fair.
Well, yeah, there are all these negotiations in
Before
previous
him.
chapters as to.
Like he wouldn't actually fight, but
Yeah.
he'll steer.
That was his.
And then that story gets complicated later in the whole Mahabharata. But in this particular thing, the two of them arrive. They hear the conch shells being blown.
Like that.
And that's the signal the war is about to start. And so they pull out their conch shells and blow them.
Yeah, and their conch shells are very special because they're, and so they blow the conch shell, which everyone should try as a practice, assuming that your neighbors are not sleeping.
Yeah, right.
Unless you really want to have a battle.
Yeah.
But it's if you really do it loudly and extend all of your breath, your body just vibrates afterwards, and your body. So
I grew up blowing them because in the Buddhist community we would use them to gather people for meditation. And,
same.
Yeah.
And you feel that. You feel this sense.
It's a great sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the trick of the art is to extend it. You know, like
I was never.
Here's
that
a
good.
here's a 2 minute.
Yeah. Some people are really good at it. I was bottom of the class.
Yeah, but you got a taste.
Yeah,
So-
for sure.
So anyway, they pulled out their, they blew them, and then Arjuna, he asks his friend, pull the chariot up the middle path. He actually uses the term between the two armies, and of course that's if you're a Buddhist, the word middle path already is making you go,
Like,
between the two armies. And so they arrived between the two armies, and Arjuna saw this one. He saw the two opposing sides as one family, which they were literally. So, and he saw on both sides, he had different gurus and teachers and close friends, and on both sides, and of course, you know, the situation was difficult because his Duryodhana, who was his
Uncle.
Was it his uncle? No.
Wasn't it?
No.
Oh.
It's his nephew, Gita.
Yeah.
Okay. He's a bad guy. He's actually a psychopathic narcissist. Not unlike many politicians.
Right.
And
one in particular.
And he, and who had a history throughout the earlier parts of actually extreme abuse of people, and including anyway, we won't go into it.
Right.
He's bad. And if
so there's a naughty.
And he had stolen,
nephew.
yeah. And he had stolen the kingdom from the good guys, who was Arjuna's older brother, was the rightful king. And anyway, it was very complex. And Arjuna he saw, you know, if they fight, then all these people are going to die. And he said, what's the point? If my friends are going to die, what's the point in winning a big kingdom?
Right.
Yeah,
that's so beautiful, right?
Yeah. And he asked,
all these killing your own
Yeah.
friends and family, right?
Or your own beliefs. Part of it was, you know, not only this crisis of, you know, the actual action that was going to happen, but a crisis of conscience that he faced. And so he was pulled in different directions and just collapsed, which for him was...
Arjuna was.
Yeah.
Because if he fought, then definitely he'd be participating in the death of many people.
So it's like the historic Civil War.
And if he didn't fight,
in the U.S. where you're fighting your own brothers.
Exactly.
Exactly. Very sad.
Yeah.
And so then he breaks down. You know, Arjuna, who has in mythology, some of the best posture. You know, it's Arjuna.
He's a yogi.
Right.
And and he's very buff and ambidextrous. You know, he was extremely talented. And he just slumps and he starts weeping. And he asks Krishna, tell me, please, what should I do? You know, and meaning Krishna said, don't fight or fight, or, you know, and
so this is how the whole story begins, is that we, you know, with the idea that maybe we don't face these huge battles every day, but that we face things where we have conflicts, where we have, you know, moral decisions we have to make, or where we just have
All
little
the time,
decisions
right?
all the time. And are you going to act, or are you going to not act? And if you are going to act, how do you decide what you're
Right.
going to do?
And
Especially
that's the
when you're,
discriminating awareness
Yeah,
you were
that's-
talking about, like how to choose.
how to,
or yeah,
or how
or
to,
what should, you know, not the discriminating awareness tells you what to do, but it allows you to watch, you know, the emotions and feelings and different philosophies and religions that guide you without getting stuck in them.
and so the story.
But also, you discriminating awareness has the confidence to choose sometimes too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like I always defend judgment, which everyone else always like
I do
judging is
too.
bad.
I'm
like,
so-
You
Well,
gotta judge.
every time you eat, you're judging.
Yeah.
I mean, eat an apple versus a pile of poop. Like
Yeah.
we all judge.
And if you don't make judgment, then it's that when you become attached to the judgment and then prejudicial.
Prejudice,
Yeah.
prejudging.
Yeah.
You're operating out
Exactly.
of your preconceptions.
If you don't,
Yeah.
it's a misuse of terms.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the things that I've always said is that discriminating awareness has gotten a bad rap in our era because of the word discriminating.
Right.
And so people think, oh, I'm not going to discriminate,
Right.
but and that's true. You don't want
There
to
they are. You can't help
prejudge,
But you can be aware of your
discriminating.
discrimination.
You watch
and
it.
your discernment and yeah, your biases, etc. So
Yeah,
So
I
the-
think some of the like Me Too movement, which is the end result of this sort of like fan culture, and like too many of us, I mean, it's the end result of a lot of messed up culture, but it's too many of us kind of like love celebrities or go along with anything. And that's like a lack of judgment.
mhm,
We have to like hold people responsible
Exactly.
for unethical, and ourselves, I guess, for
Yeah.
unethical behavior.
yeah, and so hopefully it's that those things are, you know, once you do a little bit of kind of discernment, then you start getting your feet on the ground, like you've blown the conch shell of your own awareness,
Mhm.
and you start to be able to say, okay, how do I figure out what is the best course of action to take?
Right.
And this is the story of the Gita. And so from there, where they have this, you know, where he's collapsed and Krishna says, stand up and fight. And we'll talk
But I
about
thought
that.
Krishna didn't want to fight.
But yeah, so that's what everybody,
Yeah.
that's in the
This is-
first chapter, and everybody's like, oh God, this is a book about war. What does that have to do with yoga?
Mhm. Right. And what does any of this have to do
Any
with
of
real
this.
life? Although you've touched on that.
Yeah.
And so the first thing that Krishna does, Arjuna is like in this terrible situation.
Because he's like, I can't fight.
yeah,
my-"
and then Krishna does something that many readers just Krishna smiles, you know, like like you know, he's like a sweet comedian or something. And he says, oh, a wise you know, you're talking about wisdom, but a wise person never grieves for the living or the dead. And he, you know, it's like the teaching of impermanence he starts with, which doesn't answer Arjuna's problem. And he talks about how the body changes from childhood to, you know, youth to old age, and then it dies. And he says, you know, if you really understand things, it's not upsetting at all. And he goes on, and then he says also, even in the immediate moment, you know, if you watch, you're happy and you're sad, and then it's cold and it's hot, and and so it's like, so he's pointing out this fact of impermanence, you know, that it's small scale, big scale, immediate, extended, and
But that doesn't mean that you then just say, oh, well, never mind, I can just
Exactly.
kill anybody and do anything. It's
Yeah,
that you see
Doesn't
that.
mean nihilism. It
No.
doesn't mean you don't
No.
care about anything.
because and the
you see it-
conscience there is Arjuna. He never accepts, so Krishna keeps presenting good teachings, and different teachings. He goes through all these different religious schools that were popular at the time, and he presents them well. And Arjuna says, but he doesn't accept it because none of it actually answers his question, because he's in this crisis. And so, and oftentimes people won't read the Gita that way because they're so surrendering theistically, like I just have to
Right.
accept it. So,
Right. Like it's the word of God.
it's the
gods.
word. It actually takes all of the many different religious approaches, and none of them actually answer Arjuna's question. And Krishna is totally aware. He almost says things, and Arjuna will say, "But what about that?" And then Krishna will go on in these explanations, good explanations of a different approach, different. And Arjuna says, "But."
So in a sense, what Krishna is doing is saying, you need to have all these different various perspectives, possibly even some practices like sacrifices and like understanding what sacrifice and ritual mean, and understanding what bhakti or love means beyond just your concept of it. And that you take all these perspectives into any given situation, and you have to then, and even something like dharma, your own purpose in life, and the teachings as the dharma, you have to set them all in down kind of, and say what is actually happening right here, right now, in context of all of this. Because there's never any one answer. There's not a formula for how any
So irritating.
Isn't it irritating?
Like with the Dharma, there's never, you actually have to practice it.
It's just like,
You can't just have a philosophy.
I know.
Like Trump Rinpoche is so good on that. He's like, this is not another philosophy if you get attached. That's why impermanence is such a great way to start.
Yeah. And then what happens is he starts speaking about, well, if someone is an ethical warrior, following, and ethical warriors are very rare historically, I think, but there is this ideal of them.
Like enlightened despots.
Yeah.
They're rare.
Yeah. Like the benevolent monarch or something.
Benevolent dictator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Better than the,
Better than the other kind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, and so he says, what you're working on is to cut through this need to get something out of the fight, like for your own wealth or fame or power, and to find this inner. So he says the real enemy is your own ignorance. The real enemy is lust and anger, greed. This is the enemy that you have to stand up and fight. And that's by the end of the second chapter. He said what we're actually talking about are two approaches. One is called Sankhya, which is a rather interesting early philosophical system that was not Vedic. Anyway, that's a whole other story. But so then yoga, the teaching, the schools of yoga. And he says actually they're the same thing. But that's what we're talking about. The real fight. The real fight.
It's a home operation here.
Is this challenge. And so Krishna actually, what he does is he systematically deconstructs all of he exposes and kind of deconstructs all of the misperceptions that people have about these different schools, in which people actually will stop looking and stop inquiring, stop practicing. And so it pulls you back and makes you look at the presuppositions of the schools, including, and this is what's a beautiful thing in the book is Krishna himself, he starts to say, well, actually me, because he's always talking about who am I, because we think, oh, Krishna's the big powerful God on a huge throne. And Krishna says, no, I'm actually what is arising in the present moment. I'm the taste of water. I'm the smell of the earth. That's, and he starts saying, that's me, not the smell of earth comes from me through some causal chain of religious.
That is me.
That is me.
Wow.
And he very beautifully keeps coming down off of the pedestals, which are the mental systems or dharmas that are created, not only in Arjuna's mind, but also created in all minds. And so Krishna continuously, comes down off of the pedestal or comes up, because you can have a pedestal. You could put yourself on a low pedestal, or they're up and down. But coming into the present moment, into this direct experience of
And so the angle that we really have worked with.
And just to restate, most of our audience is on Instagram. I think YouTube, we're restarting, and Facebook, something's going on. But if people have questions on Instagram, please. And Mary and Richard here are offering a course on Shambhala Publications. We put the link in Facebook, but you can just search like Shambhala Publications, Richard Freeman,
Online.
Mary Taylor,
Shambhala Online.
Shambhala Online.
Yeah.
And find this course on the Gita.
And the angle that we do in the course and that we took in the book, because to us wanting to bring it into modern day,
into relevance,
is that all of these teachings really are needing to be embodied. Just like at the beginning of the text where they blew the conch shells and they got into their bodies and had insight, that when you try to understand things, and if you can figure out how to consistently come back, feel your feet on the ground, feel the sense of what it feels like when truth is actually flowing in your blood, rather than some theory that you've made up.
Which is probably like the theories is where aggression comes out, because you'll fight and die for your theory instead of embodying in that present moment.
Yeah, and seeing and feeling the sense of interconnectedness, feeling
and impermanence.
And so those two themes.
Then seeing all beings.
Yeah.
Right.
So Krishna keeps saying, well, I'm in the heart of all beings.
Right.
So
if you kill any being, even your enemy, you're killing yourself or your cause. Or
So it's quite
So what happens? Do they go to war?
Well, in this book it doesn't.
In the book they don't make it to the war. It's by the very end of the book, the 18th chapter, Krishna has still not answered Arjuna specifically, but he's taught him all this stuff about seeing all beings.
Right.
And then he says, and this is, once you see this, you have this vision of all beings within you, it's a beautiful vision. Then he says, now do what you choose, because the way that you would know how to act in a difficult circumstance is with basically science. He says you act, but if you're not attached to the fruit of the action, you're acting to help. Then you'll get feedback, and so all the action like that gives you knowledge or better information. Like it's like a good doctor or something. They have theories, but they actually are paying attention.
Yeah.
And so they'll try something. Oh, that didn't work, and they have no attachment or embarrassment or pride. They'll just say, "Oh, I just learned something," and so that's the way Arjuna has to. He has to learn to act without that attachment to his own, gaining something for himself, but acting out of compassion or service to even the environment, and then he'll start to learn. But if he doesn't act, he'll never learn anything. Or if he just follows, the dogma.
I love this. I studied this many, many years ago now in school, and I was so bored by it. I thought it was so, I was like, why are we reading, kind of like with the Bible, I'm sorry to be offensive, but like, why are we reading these weird myths?
Yeah.
But this feels like immediately relevant to actual life and practice, like spiritual practice. not like you even have to make a connection. Like it in itself is relevant.
Right. And, your response to it is what many, many of us have. But
Right.
that response, or the response where you take it as the Bible or whatever.
Right.
And
The
then,
theistic, like solid approach.
yeah, and either of those approaches kind of, it's not going to serve you. And so once you get beyond that and start seeing, wow, these books like the Gita, like, the Iliad and the Odyssey and, the religious texts of the world were written to solve everyday problems of the time. And so they're still written we're still having the same kinds of problems.
Well, because human nature
because
is.
we're still these
It
monkeys.
doesn't change.
They're still here.
No, I mean, I'm really active on Twitter, and this whole Bhagavad Gita, the battles feels like Twitter world where everyone's ready to kill each other just for a couple likes.
Yeah, which is
They
just
are.
so
Yeah,
fascinating to watch.
And we need, but then
tragic,
it's so interesting because we need someone to like find that middle path, but the middle path can't be Joe Manchin. Like the middle path can't be like, let's not do much about climate change.
Yeah.
Like that's not the middle. Like what is the middle path?
Yeah.
In today's society with Trump on one side and climate crisis on the other, and half humanity
the middle
crying
path
out for
is
help.
that interconnectedness. 'Cause you see that, so let's say politically, the extreme right and the extreme left are actually the same thing. If you study the history of those views.
Yeah.
Well,
you definitely see that with anti-vax beliefs. It's super popular on the extreme left and the right.
Right.
Yeah, isn't that strange?
Yeah.
And
it's
then
like you complete the circle.
yeah. And then just getting mad, then it's an ego thing, a matter of pride. But if there were actually, people saying, hey, let's communicate.
Yeah.
Right.
And so the middle path starts to be fueled by this ability to communicate and the ability to really see the other person as a person. And on social media, seeing the other person as a person is one of the last things that, we do sometimes, because it's like, it's all about image. It's all about the fast little thing that you've tweeted.
And you're not seeing yourself as a person.
And you're not seeing yourself.
Right. You're seeing yourself as an opinion who has to fight for its survival.
An identity. So you've identified.
Like ego. Yeah. That's so sad.
Yeah.
Like a selfie.
So we need like an Arjuna or Krishna, I don't know which, in social media.
Yeah.
Like we need someone fighting. I guess it's Krishna who's teaching the way forward.
Yeah. That's
to like referee the two armies.
Well, and to let the two armies see that they actually can do it themselves.
Right.
And that's the bottom line.
Of course they can.
You have to keep coming back to that. In the very end of the Gita, that's one of the final teachings is just keep looking again, look again, look again. And that's for all of us when we're in a conflict or we're in a crisis. You make a decision, you take an action, but then you don't stop there. You look again, say, okay, what do I do now? And so it's fascinating.
Yeah, it sure
is.
Very
cool book.
Yeah, it's super cool. So people can sign up to join you guys. There's 3 live sessions and a bunch of videos.
Yeah, we have chanting,
teachings.
We have teachings. They're recorded. We have some embodiment exercises and 3 classes. And
cool. That's so cool you're doing this.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
And then it'll be like available forever.
Yeah.
In some way. You can sign up.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
I don't know about the live classes.
No, we'll be.
But we should say those.
Yeah, they'll be safe.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They won't be
Yeah.
Yeah, they won't be live forever. You won't be doing that, like sitting around. Yeah. How cool. Well, thank you so much for doing this. And thank you for joining me as always.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
it's
you.
so good to see
And we
you.
had Ivan, I think, touch in on YouTube.
Good.
One of our like
Thanks.
4 people on YouTube.
Thank you all for joining
Yeah,
us.
but thank you. There's a huge audience. I think something's up with Facebook today. It's not having a good time. But if anyone has questions on Instagram, looks like we left the link in there. The offering, what is the offering? Is this, well, you can say, but it's sort of involved with your book, right? Connected with your book.
Yeah.
Which is bringing wisdom from the Bhagavad Gita into modern life. And then there's an online course. So thank you, everyone. I hate to hang up when so many people are on, but I think we're
Thank
good.
you.
We can't be live forever.
No.
That's the impermanence
The
teaching.
impermanence.
Thank God.
Thank you.
All right. You heard like Facebook, Instagram.